Hello, I'm Jim Cornell, and this is Base to Base, the weekly biotech podcast from Air Coastal Media. Yes, welcome again to the Base to Base Biotech podcast, and this episode is going out on May the 9th, just in time for Mother's Day in North America. We've already had the one in the UK, so sorry mums. In spite of not being Mother's Day, there was a holiday here in the UK on Monday, which is always a nice break, especially considering the weather has been so good in the UK. Still a bit chilly at night though, at least here in Scotland, but no complaints. It's also that very busy time of year when all of the events and conferences are in full swing, so trying to hook up interviews has been a bit of a challenge, especially when you add in time zone differences as well. Quite a few good comments about the podcast on LinkedIn, and the subscriber numbers continue to climb, so thank you to everyone for your support. If you do have suggestions for who should be on the podcast, please do get in touch at jim@deeptechdigest.com. If you missed last week's episode, please do head over to deeptechdigest.com or via your favourite podcast app, where you can usually just scroll through the previous episodes of Base to Base. Last week, our conversations were a very useful in-depth look at the Drug Supply Chain Security Act with IntelliGuard, and MoonLake Immunotherapeutics, with a look at results for the company's nanobody sonelokimab. This week we're talking about a biotech startup called Cradle, dubbed Photoshop for proteins as they revolutionise protein design. But first we're talking about a surgical platform that is making a massive difference around the world. Proximie's platform with extended AI agents provides real-time data across the surgical pathway, including advanced scheduling modules, and it's also helping in several ways, including operational efficiency and the bottom line, helping to save lives. To tell us about the platform and how it's helping hospitals and patients is Proximie's CEO and founder, plastic surgeon Dr. Nadine Hachach-Haram. So I wonder if you could give me first a bit of background and history of the company.
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, thank you so much for making the time. It's great to spend these 30 minutes together to tell you a bit about what I've been working on over the last few years. My name is Nadine Hachach-Haram. I'm a reconstructive plastic surgeon, mainly in the areas of breast and pelvic cancer reconstruction. I'm a consultant surgeon in the NHS, and also I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a founder and CEO of my own medtech company called Proximie. And Proximie was really born out of my experience as a surgeon and my deep belief that, surgical access should be accessible and available to everyone. And where you live shouldn't determine the quality of surgical care you receive and whether you live from that either. I founded the company because as a practicing surgeon, I saw firsthand the fundamental challenges that we were facing in surgery around variability in access, variability of quality, variability in sort of workforce and productivity. And it was my way to bridge the gap in surgical care, to enable us to bring high quality expertise to any operating room in the world and to use technology as the enabler. And when I use the word operating room, I mean any procedure room in a hospital. So that could be an operating room, it could be a cath lab, it could be an endoscopy suite, it's any one of those environments. And what Proximie does is it's a software that you deploy in any of these rooms. We are completely vendor neutral, procedure neutral, cloud neutral. And what we do is we enable that operating room to turn into a smart and intelligent and connected operating room. And what I mean by that is that by having Proximie in that room, you are now able to connect, collect, and activate. You can connect experts that can virtually scrub in from anywhere in the world to inform decision-making, to make surgery safer, smarter, more accessible. We can collect multimodal data from the devices in the room, the medical records in the room, the cameras in the room to really understand and streamline what's going on in the operating room. And we can activate insights from that consolidated and curated knowledge. And therefore, we are able to drive quality and safety and productivity by streamlining workflows, reducing variation, enabling collaboration and performance reviews, and helping hospitals treat more patients and improve the performance without sacrificing the care quality they deliver. I'll just end by saying, today we are global. We are in over 800 hospitals in around 50 countries, enabling tens of thousands of procedures, and we're only just getting started. We're very impact driven as an organization, and we really believe that by leveraging our technology the way we've designed it as a platform means we can improve surgical care at scale, support our healthcare workers, and really give patients the best chance at better outcomes.
How does that platform look in terms of visually? I mean, how does it work? And is it intuitive, or is it something that needs a lot of training?
It's a great question. I mean, one of the big kind of exam questions I gave the team from day one is I said, healthcare workers' time is incredibly precious. We are so stretched as it is. And so whatever we bring into that environment has to be very simple, very intuitive, and really a few clicks at most. And largely has to take off administrative and task-based burden, not add to it. And so what you see in an operating room is some cameras installed that are fully, anonymizing the data, obfuscating data, etc. You'll have a little screen that's sort of fitted on the wall. And that will basically collect multiple views and information from lots of different devices in the room. It will ambiently capture all the time stamping of what's happening in the room on the day, and it'll automatically push that to the medical record. So you're reducing all the administrative burden that the nurses have to do in the day. And what it does is that anyone remotely, simply by using their phone, tablet, or computer who are invited to the case, can virtually scrub in by simply pressing a button. And they're involved in the case. They can see the case from multiple angles. They can speak and interact with the team. They can telestrate on the screen and engage with the surgical team. And they can help deliver best quality care. So there's an interactive aspect to it. And there's a data capture, data automation, and data entry and insights piece to it. And what's really, really important here is that all of this is happening in real time. Traditionally, you see these technologies that will capture data and then do some analysis afterwards. But what you see with Proximie is all real-time data happening. And that is making it accessible, easy to use, and simply just intuitive across the surgical pathway, helping teams really understand what's working and where time is being lost and where we can drive better productivity and better quality. So this enables us to be much more proactive than reactive.
When you were developing this, how did you do that process of developing something that's different and that was an advance on current techniques?
Yeah, it's a good question, because what we built was, I guess you could say, more radical than incremental. And really, this idea and concept started with me back in 2013, 2014, before I even set up the company. I had spent about 10 years in global surgery. I had spent about 6-7 years working for medical device companies, advising them on, new product development, product adoption, etc. And what was clear is that, the more of the same, the co-presence in a room, the manual, the analog environments were just not conducive to true scale and intelligence. And that if we really wanted to build smart, intelligent ORs, we had to think completely differently. Now, I was a video gamer as a kid. My dad was a computer engineer. So you could say I had a bit of an affinity to technology. And at the time, we were starting to see different technologies come to bear, like the Google Glass, Pokemon Go. There was talk of augmented reality, digitization, etc. And I started to think to myself, well, what if I could not spend 14 hours on a flight to X country to do work? What if I could just virtually scrub in? And that's really how it started, of how do we virtually scrub in? Because that's the hardest piece, where you have to deliver this globally with no latency on a video stack. And then we started to develop and say, well, given we're already in these rooms and we're capturing, connecting every element of the surgical environment, the procedure, the process, and the data in real time, how do we not only enable more productive and collaborative surgical environments, how do we support real-time decision-making and continuous learning? And so initially, it's just hired a few developers to build a prototype. We tested it in a few different countries to look at, scale across a global, environment. And the evidence was phenomenal. And so on the back of that, we raised money and built the business. And what's been always important to me is demonstrating value, because you're asking a very traditional way of working to change and to be disrupted. And so you want to really win hearts and minds along that process. And so it was really around, well, what is the value we're going to bring back to the healthcare workers and to the hospital? Well, what we know is that when you speak to healthcare workers, we interviewed over 100 surgical leaders, and they said 98% believe measures need to be taken to reduce time wasted in surgical flow. 50% reported spending over an hour daily just resolving preventable issues like staffing and flow and automation. These inefficiencies don't just affect productivity, they affect morale, they affect the burnout of staff, they worsen patient outcomes. And so I started to think about how we leverage innovation technology to, one, improve access to care, because today 5 billion people around the world lack access to safe surgery, but two, improve the challenges we have around the workforce strain and reduce administrative burden, enhance utilization of those hugely expensive assets and teams, and make sure that we don't burn out the staff that we have. And that's really where the idea came from. Obviously, we've iterated it over time, and we are a company that's led by clinicians for clinicians. And so we work incredibly closely with our customers. We do a lot of co-development with our beta sites. We do a lot of voice of customer work. We let our customers help drive and define the problem and help us together work to find the solution as well.
And what kind of problems have you been able to solve?
Well, we definitely are solving an access problem. So we've shown that we can train twice as many doctors and nurses in half the time. We've shown that we've been able to connect healthcare workers all around the world to deliver best care to patients. And we've shown that we've been able to support the morale of healthcare workers in stressful environments with complex cases, knowing they have a colleague available at the end of the line to support them. So that's on the kind of care delivery side. We've also been able to demonstrate that we can actually optimize OR time by up to 24%. And so what we've shown, and this was a study that we did with a big US health partner, is that if you're able to take that time and utilize it more effectively, this could translate into 9,000 additional procedures annually, which has a direct impact on reducing surgical backlogs and improving patient care. We've also been able to show that by working through this, we can actually reduce administrative burden for staff and hopefully reduce the late finishes for them as well. And so all of these are components that are really critical because it's really about workforce, quality and safety, and productivity.
Are you working with governments to try and help them out? Because I know that it's one of the major issues in the UK election was waiting times for operations, that kind of thing. So do you work with governments to try and help with those things?
We're definitely engaging across, for example, the National Health Service, looking at how we can support reducing wait lists. So, we know in England, there's approximately 6.3 million individuals on a waiting list for elective care. And so if we're able to bridge that gap and reduce that to bring more access to equitable care in more rural settings, connecting and developing more productivity within our existing infrastructure, then we are confident we can make a big difference. And we've already got programs and projects of work across multiple hospitals in the NHS to work through that. And hopefully that will filter up at a national level as well.
Is this something that would work in different settings? Is it just a case of tweaking it? So say if you were to use this in the US health system or the Canadian health system, is that possible?
Yeah, so Proximie was designed from day one to be a global business. So we are able, and today are being used in countries all around the world. Whether you are in the most sophisticated hospital in the US or the UK, or you're in a rural hospital, we've even done cases all across East Africa and other parts of the world. So we are incredibly accessible. You don't really need to modify the software for it. It is designed for a global healthcare environment because these challenges are global. These are not challenges that are unique to any one organization. And because we're cloud-based, we're lightweight, and we're hardware agnostic, you don't need expensive new equipment. You don't need to be distinguished between a high-resourced hospital versus a low. And you don't need to be in a world-leading academic center versus a center with more limited resource. We consistently deliver care and desire to improve access and reduce waste and provide safe care to anyone in any system. And that, I think, is what has differentiated Proximie from anything on the market, is that global outlook from day one.
And do different healthcare models affect what you're doing?
No, because what we do is we enable within the environment of the operating room, irrespective if you're in a private health system, a public health system, a teaching hospital, not a teaching hospital. And we've got evidence of its use across multiple countries and geographies and multiple healthcare settings.
Oh, that's excellent. And what does it mean for surgeons have different capabilities and different skill levels? How does it help, and how are you able to help with somebody that may be a little more inexperienced or that might have not the same kind of equipment that they would in a multi-million-dollar hospital?
Yeah, so what's really important for us is that accessibility piece. So with Proximie, no matter where you are in the world, we evaluate the environment you're working in. And depending on the environment, we either just have to deploy our software in that room because you already have all the equipment already integrated in the room. But if not, we have a pre-packaged turnkey hardware solution that goes into the room to turn that room into a Proximized room. And so once you have the system in there, it doesn't really matter where you are in the world and what type of setting you'll be able to access. We've designed our system to require very low bandwidth and very low internet connectivity, again, to make it accessible to all. And we've designed our system to work both on the edge and in the cloud, which again means that you can work within any jurisdiction that may have different restrictions around data sovereignty, data transit, etc. And so we are very, very neutral from that perspective. Even what medical record system you use, what device you're using, is it an open case or a minimally invasive case, you'll be able to use Proximie within an environment. And in terms of training, it's a very simple onboarding. We have people in all over the world that work in different languages that have been able to access and use our system. The other thing that's been great about it is that by deploying this software in these hospitals, clinical healthcare workers are reaching out to their network now and engaging on cases. You might have a really difficult case that you might not have worked on a huge volume of them in a particular rural setting. You can now have a world expert on that case dial in and work with you through the case and empower you to be supported, upskilled, and trained to deliver the best care to the patient and meet them where they're at. So that collaboration aspect is critical. And what you're doing is you're really now democratizing access to surgery and taking surgery outside of the four walls of any one hospital to a borderless operating room.
Is it useful in emergency conditions?
Absolutely. We've seen it used in emergency conditions. We've even seen teams put it on emergency ambulances to bring access to the EDs on showing them what's going on with the case as they're coming in transit, and then equally bring the expertise to an EMS environment or an ambulance environment in an acute setting. We've seen people use it for stroke management, cardiac management in acute cardiac cases, acute surgical management, and conditions like necrotizing fasciitis and others. And numerous case studies have been published about the use of Proximie in these environments.
So I guess it's really positively affecting the end of the line, which is patients. Do you have lots of positive outcomes?
100%. I mean, for us, it comes back down to the three challenges we're seeing within healthcare today. So challenges around the workforce, challenges around quality and safety, and challenges around productivity. And so for us, what we're able to do here is reduce staff burnout, improve care across departments, automate administrative tasks, and enable global collaboration on complex cases. And I think for that, we've seen historically technology in operating rooms to be very siloed, to be very limited to a specific advanced surgical tool, but very little about integration between people, the data, and the processes that support them. And addressing this requires not just innovation, but trust. You need tools that are intuitive, that are respectful of workflow, that are aligned with clinical priorities. And that's exactly what we've built at Proximie. We're not just an application. We are a complete end-to-end platform that's delivering a service change in how we deliver surgical care in real time.
Is that platform constantly evolving? I mean, is AI affecting that in any way?
Absolutely. I mean, we're very fortunate in our company. I would say more than 50% of the company is actually R&D and development. And that's really important because for us, it's really important to lean into these evolving and accelerating sort of technologies and enabling technologies. There's so much happening today in the world of innovation, particularly around AI. And for us, we know that hospitals generate immense volumes of data, and nearly 97% of this data remains unused. And at Proximie, what we do is we use AI and computer vision to collect and analyze real-time data across the surgical pathway, from patient prep to case completion. And what we're able to do then is to really drive with AI a proactive surgical care pathway where insights are surfaced in real time and teams can continuously learn, adapt, and improve. But importantly, it's not about replacing people, because that's often this misnomer when we talk about AI. It's really about empowering surgical teams with better tools to do what they do best, which is deliver safe, timely, and life-changing care.
And so what does the next, 12, 18 months look like for the company? What are you working on at the moment?
Well, look, last year we tripled our footprint, and the goal is definitely to go beyond that this year as our analytics and insights continue to demonstrate value that we're adding to health systems. We've been able to demonstrate that real comprehensive business case around improving efficiency, productivity, and increasing, the output from surgical ORs. And what we're doing now is we're further building out the analytics and insights capabilities with things like ambient op notes, better hospital communications and notifications that impact workflow, as well as using the real-time and accurate data to produce a more streamlined journey end-to-end, reducing turnover time, ensuring more patients get treated, and ensuring our staff get home in a timely fashion as well. So more to come, but there's a lot of exciting R&D happening behind the scenes, and I hope I can come back maybe in a few months and update you on that as well.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention?
No, I want to thank you for the time. I think, our report is public. It's a very extensive report that we've done looking at the benefits case around a technology like Proximie. We'd love for people to access it, to visit our website, and really learn more about what we're doing. And if interested, to reach out.
It's funny how it does seem like it's a relatively simple idea, and I guess the best solutions often are. It's also great that this is a platform that's not just helping in state-of-the-art hospitals, it's making a positive difference around the world. Elise de Reus is the co-founder of Cradle, a biotech startup that is revolutionising protein design. I guess you could think of it as the Photoshop for proteins. They're leveraging Gen AI to optimize proteins for animal-free food, better medicines, and sustainable materials. Cradle closed a $73 million Series B last year, and it already works with more than 20 biotech companies, including industry giants like Novo Nordisk and Johnson & Johnson. Cradle also operates a wet lab to generate real-world validation data, which is critical in a field where synthetic data remains limited. And while I certainly know Photoshop very well, as I've used it for more than 25 years, Elise is much better equipped to talk about proteins and the amazing things Cradle can do. So maybe we could start by looking at the origins and the evolution of the company to this point.
Yeah. Well, the origin of the company is the huge opportunity that we have in front of us for protein design and biotech in general to contribute to human and planetary health. And the problem or the obstacle that's still preventing us from realizing that potential is the long and expensive development timelines, specifically in the field of protein engineering. Now, for myself, I was working in the wet lab as a scientist at companies, most recently Zymergen, a biotech company on the west coast of the US, where I was engineering cells as production factories for small molecules and proteins. And I had all these great robots and laboratory automation at my fingertips, but I still ran into the time and the resources that it takes to get bio-based products to market. Meanwhile, my co-founders, Steph and Eli, were on the ground within Google, where they were working on projects in the hardware and software of machine learning. And they were seeing the huge advances in machine learning in fields like natural language, and also the applications within the natural sciences, like the domain of protein engineering. But Google didn't have a wet lab, and machine learning models need data to train on and improve over time. So we got talking together, and we were wondering what would happen if we bring these fields closer together. So the intersection of machine learning and biotechnology. And this led to founding Cradle as a platform to help scientists design better proteins in less time using generative AI.
Where is the headquarters?
So we have offices in Switzerland, which is where there's a lot of machine learning talent. Think of academic institutions like ETH, but also big tech like Google and Meta and others. And then we have an office and a wet lab in Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
I think a lot of people hear the term artificial intelligence or machine learning, and it seems to be that a lot of companies or many companies are saying we have to get on board. How do companies determine whether it's better to do that in-house and hire people, or whether it's better to farm it out? And if they do so, how do they determine who they should be partnering with?
That's a great question. We do see that generative AI is becoming a go-to for consumers. The use of tools like ChatGPT and Perplexity or image models like DALL-E are pretty widespread right now. But it's important to remember that we are in the very early phase of adoption, and we don't actually know how the future will play out. And what we're seeing now, these big models are only really a small part of the puzzle of driving real-world impact. And if you think back to the DeepSeek moment, for example, we saw a huge response of stocks of certain companies crashing in response to this new foundation model for human language that was smaller and more efficient to run. People didn't see it coming. And there was this great response from Satya Nadella from Microsoft, who wrote, models themselves, as they become more of a commodity, you see that value will get created by how you steer and fine-tune these models with your business data and workflow, and how you compose the user interface layer. And I think a similar thing holds in protein design, where we saw a model like AlphaFold predicting 3D structure, and there are open source models for generating new proteins. But at Cradle, we believe that true value will lie not in these foundational models themselves, but in how AI is productized and applied to solve real-world biological design challenges. And the users of Cradle, so scientists working in the wet lab or their computational colleagues, will wonder, will this model work for me? And they'll face the very real challenge that testing any output of a model is very expensive if you have to validate it in the wet lab, compared to just Googling to fact check an answer from ChatGPT. And leaders in these organizations want to know, what is the ROI? So the return on investment, if we use technology, if we build it in-house or bring in an external vendor, and also how to bring this technology into the organization in a lasting way. And then, of course, what is the business model of a company if you choose to partner out? And all of these dynamics are still very much in flux and shaping the protein design field. And this is where we as Cradle see a huge opportunity to provide a platform, a tool, an application, a product that will help scientists to drive real world results in companies across pharma, agriculture, chemicals, food, and more.
In that regard, how does your technology work?
We have described it as ChatGPT, but then for proteins. What Cradle does is help scientists to bring generative AI into the protein engineering workflow, aimed at accelerating programs. And that could be from the very early discovery phase up until the lead optimization phase, where now a protein has to be tweaked so that it meets all the different objectives that are required to bring it to market as an antibody or an enzyme in a chemical process or a peptide. Generative AI before ChatGPT wasn't even a term that people were aware of, but what it means in the context of protein engineering is that scientists can use Cradle to generate new protein candidates that contain certain amino acid mutations, and that Cradle can help to predict the outcomes in the wet lab. And so at the heart of the platform are machine learning models that have learned what you can call the protein language by observing billions of naturally occurring protein sequences. And then scientists can very easily inject their own data that they generated in the wet lab to train a custom model that can speak their dialect, if you will, of the protein language and suggest new proteins that will meet their objectives. And what this looks like is the prompt for this protein generative model is, this is my sequence that I'm working on. This is the protein that I'm working on. And these are the different assays that I plan to run for the different properties that I care about. So for example, in antibodies, that could be binding affinity, thermal stability, properties that enable a pharmaceutical company to manufacture the antibody. And what these models will then do is generate sequences that are improved, that are diverse, that contain non-intuitive mutations to this protein. And a scientist can then validate these sequences in their wet lab.
Is that something that's easily done? Is it intuitive, or do you have to train companies how to deal with this?
It is very easy to use. So we can onboard new scientists onto the Cradle platform in half an hour. You can actually generate new protein sequences at the click of a button, but there's a lot of technology that goes in the background to make sure that these models are robust and that they're reliable, and that when they learn from wet lab data that is provided by scientists, that they are learning the right things. One thing to call out about Cradle and how we are different is our business model. So we believe that scientists hold all the creativity and the expertise to bring new and innovative products to market, and that they are more effective if provided with the right tools. So we see Cradle as a very important tool to accelerate protein design workflows. This means that scientists and organizations pay for it as a software tool, so an annual license to the software, without offering up royalties or milestone payments or ownership of the IP. So any sequence that is produced by Cradle's models will be the IP of the customer.
You mentioned a little bit about the different applications. What sectors are you finding that it is most applicable to?
So the beauty of using machine learning for optimizing proteins is that models don't really care about where humans choose to use these proteins. What is important is the ability of models to very quickly become an expert at a certain protein and the properties of that protein that the scientist wants to improve. And this holds across industries. In the pharmaceutical industry, you can think of vaccines or antibodies or peptides. In non-pharma applications, you can imagine enzymes that are used in laundry detergents or food processing, or maybe chemicals that are currently derived from petrochemical sources. And the common denominator here is that these scientists will be looking to speed up development timelines, where one of the central challenges is finding a protein that meets all of the different requirements. So stability and efficacy and manufacturability all in one. And this is a huge component of the development timeline. In, for example, pharmaceutical development, the mean time to get a biologic into clinical trials from discovery to phase 1 is 3 to 6 years. Cutting down those timelines means that products get to market faster. They're more likely to be first in class. And this saves R&D spending. And it also gets really important products to patients faster.
Quite a few benefits there. Are there any other benefits that you can help companies with?
Absolutely. So we are proud to work with companies like Novo Nordisk or J&J, Corteva on the agriculture side, but also IFF and Novonesis. And scientists at those companies use Cradle to shorten timelines, so develop these better proteins, but also to get more value from data that is collected in the wet lab, because machine learning models are able to learn from both winning designs as well as from designs that do less well than the previous round. And so there's actually more learning that happens in every round of wet lab experiments. There's also more novel solutions that these models come up with. And so we've seen several instances where projects where Cradle was used resulted in winning protein designs that really made scientists scratch their head and wonder what on earth could be going on that made this protein a better design than the one that came before it. And these are kind of magical moments where you really see an interaction between the human that is in the loop, so the scientist with all the expertise on that protein, and these machine learning models that are learning to understand the fitness landscape, as we call it, of this protein and how to navigate it more precisely and more efficiently.
Do you have any examples of those magic moments that you mentioned?
Yeah, one which we talked about at a conference in Leiden last year was a project that we did together with scientists at Johnson & Johnson, Innovative Medicine, where these scientists were working on a vaccine against Staphylococcus aureus, or Staph aureus for short, which is a pathogenic bacteria that actually causes over 1 million deaths per year. So I think in 2019, it was associated with 1 million deaths. The challenge of optimizing this protein was stabilizing it while keeping its efficacy. So making sure that this protein did not unfold or crash out at higher temperatures. And scientists used Cradle to stabilize this protein in one experimental round that took 2 months, where a similar project had taken 7 rounds and over 24 months. And they were surprised at a few of the specific mutations that came out of the Cradle machine learning models, which was really neat to say.
And I suspect as well, if it was that much shorter, it's also that much more cost effective.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you think about vaccines, if you have more stable proteins that will reliably trigger the immune response that you want, you have better results and fewer deaths. But it also means, for example, that you can ship a therapeutic or a vaccine around the world without needing quite the same cold chain. And so it's equitable access that you're talking about. And in other parts of the vaccine space, if you're thinking about the adjuvants, so small molecules that you add to vaccines to make sure that they're triggering an immune response, you can use biotechnology to produce these with enzymes outside of the vulnerable plants that you would otherwise maybe extract them from. And so there the effect is sustainability.
You're working with companies to help them develop either drugs or products or better systems. How is that, do you think, going to benefit the end user, whether that's a drug patient or a farmer utilizing this in agriculture?
If you're able to optimize a protein across all these different properties without having to compromise on some of them, you're looking at therapeutics that are going to be more effective across these different properties and these different characteristics. Therapies that are more effective, therapies that are approved faster because it's you can earlier in the development process check for whether this protein will meet all the requirements or at the target product profile as it's called in the pharma industry. And if you zoom out one level, then lower costs for developing new protein-based products will also mean that more of these programs can get funded, and it will be more accessible for organizations and R&D teams to try and develop these programs. And that's where hopefully you'll see a large contribution to the planetary and human health, where we expect biotech can play a role. So more companies that can get funded, more projects that can get funded within the larger organizations, and a higher chance and a more predictable chance of success in these programs. It could also mean programs where machine learning models do not see much room for further improvement can also be stopped sooner, so that less resources are wasted maybe on programs where the chances of success are very low. And so on a whole, it means that you're going to have a more efficient allocation of R&D resources.
And hopefully that also extends to it being more global than in just more developed countries like the US, Western Europe, Japan. You hope that this means other parts of the world get access to some of these required drugs or techniques or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. And this is one of the reasons that we are building Cradle as a software platform rather than launching our own therapeutics or our own enzymes. We see that the ability to invest in the fundamental performance of these machine learning models really improves the reliability with which you can use them. One of the ways in which we do that is that we have our internal wet lab here in Amsterdam, where we generate training data and validation data so that any new iteration of the machine learning models that we develop can be tested in a real world setting. And it increases the performance of these models before they end up in the hands of scientists. An analogy that we use there sometimes is self-driving cars. Like, you wouldn't get into a self-driving car if you weren't sure that the company developing the self-driving car had actual cars on the road and was testing them in all these different situations. And the fact that we're building this platform at Cradle allows us to invest in developing the best machine learning models right out of the gate that then allow scientists to add their wet lab data to refine these models even further.
Does that mean that the more companies that you work with and the further down their own pathways that they go, that will improve because you have more data to work from?
A very important point here is that all the data that scientists upload to the Cradle platform is private to them, private to their team or their organization. And so data is never used between different customers. What it does mean is that as more projects get run on Cradle, the quality of the software and the quality of the models will improve, or the ability of models to very quickly learn about the project-specific protein and how to efficiently utilize the wet lab data without requiring us to pool data across customers to train some foundation model. And that maybe loops back nicely to where we started the conversation, in that it's not always about the foundation model, but about how organizations can inject their own data and utilize AI in their existing workflows.
Where do you go from here, I guess?
We are continuing to invest in the quality of our machine learning models that really are the heart of the Cradle platform. So continuing to do more fundamental research, run experiments in our own wet lab, and generate data to make sure that these models are robust and learn efficiently. And we're also continuing to invest in the user interface of the software by interviewing users and thinking through what other use cases could be for the platform and how we can help scientists in the wet lab and bioinformaticians to make the best use of this new wave of generative AI tools.
Do you see it extending beyond simply proteins into other areas?
You are seeing more models also published that are multimodal, so maybe drawing in genomic data or from the chemical space. So there are opportunities to expand the abilities of these models and platforms even further. And it is something that we are continuously evaluating: what new models, what new architectures are available, where can we innovate, and how does it improve the performance of the platform in the hands of our customers, which is ultimately what we care about.
So, well, two really great guests today and some really impressive information. Yet another conversation there I could have kept asking questions about, but you've got to stop somewhere. Maybe we can have Cradle on again at some point. Unless, of course, they start blocking my emails. Next week, the interviews are already done, but I'm going to be sneaky and make it like an end-of-season cliffhanger so that you join us next week. If you have questions or comments or suggestions for guests, please do get in touch, and you can do so at jim@deeptechdigest.com. So until next week, wherever in the world you are, you have a great week. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Base to Base Biotech podcast. The Base to Base Biotech podcast is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.